Hello and welcome to the Election Corner on One Man Think Tank. Today we're going to be going over the 2020 election in Georgia as it currently stands, while also taking a look at some of the historic trends in the state so we can kind of figure out which direction the state's headed in and what needs to happen for the incumbents to win or for the challengers to win. Let's start off by going over the current polling for the three races. One general election for the Senate, one special election for the Senate, and of course the presidential election. Now, we're using Wikipedia because they're a good sort of easy-to-view polling tracker. So we start off with the aggregate polls, 270 to win, who does weight polls slightly, while Real Clear Politics, I swear I'm on like the third take of this, and I haven't been able to get it right yet. Real Clear Politics has not gotten, does not do any weighting. So they're going to be raw data. However, they both do exclude certain polls. I don't know the reasoning off the top of my head, but just be aware. So 270 to win shows them at a dead heat. The Republican incumbent David Purdue versus Jon Ossoff, the Democratic challenger, both at 44.8%, 10.4% undecided, meaning they are perfectly tied according to 270 to win. This race is now a toss-up. While Real Clear Politics has the Republican at 45.8%, while Jon Ossoff is at 43%, with 11% undecided, giving Purdue about a 3-point margin. But, as you can see, this Purdue is hovering around the mid-40s, while Ossoff is overall mid to low 40s. So what does the general polling tell us? Well, as you can see, Ossoff has always been a pretty prime contender for the seat, winning some of the predicted polling even back in March. However, as you can see, for many of these polls, it's required David Purdue to be polling low as well. Once you start losing undecideds, all of a sudden, Purdue begins to win quite heavily. However, there's a second factor here, which I'll get to in a moment, on how well Purdue does, and it's got an L in front of it. But for Jon Ossoff, on the other hand, he's been polling okay, but you can see a trend of him polling upwards. For the longest time, while Purdue would end up in the high 40s, Ossoff would have a floor of about 43%. Now we're seeing Ossoff gain, especially with this poll done by Quinnipiac University, which shows Ossoff in the lead in a very tight race, as well as this one by Daily Kos, which, while they aren't the greatest pollster, is a decent pollster and have been accurate to trends at the very least. We also have Monmouth here, which has shown a steady decline for David Purdue, while showing no uptick for Jon Ossoff, meaning at the very least, Purdue is losing some popularity. While there can be an argument made, Ossoff is slightly gaining it. So what about the Magic L factor? As you can see, there's a third-party libertarian candidate running. And once you throw him in the race, all of a sudden, so we can't have, with Monmouth, we have a reported gain, so keep that in mind. But once you throw him in the race, Purdue does notably worse, seemingly taking points from Purdue. Now, will the Libertarian get 3% in the polls? Probably not. But it does indicate that people are overall shifting away from Purdue. Not necessarily toward Ossoff, but definitely away from Purdue. On to the next one, Georgia's special election, which is an open primary, as you can see from all the fun little lines there. It's an open primary, meaning all the candidates will run against each other, and the top two go to a runoff election. Now, for the longest time, this race was looking very much in danger for the Democrats due to the fact they had three candidates in the race, two of which who would regularly get over 10% in the polls, essentially siphoning off votes from the other. However, now it seems the race is beginning to flatten out, with Republicans getting behind two candidates, Doug Collins and Kelly Loeffler. Kelly Loeffler would be the incumbent, by the way, while Raphael Warnock is consolidating the Democratic vote, mostly taking away from Ed Tarver, but also a good chunk from Matt Lieberman, about 5%. So much so that even when Lieberman is polling quite well, he's still behind Raphael Warnock. Now, what does this mean for the race in general? It means the Democrats are consolidating. It means the Republicans are kind of consolidating, but they're still controversial. Now, in order to truly understand what this means, it means we're going to have a runoff of a Democrat versus a Republican. We just don't know if it's going to be Doug Collins or Kelly Loeffler. So let's go down to the individual matchups. In a Loeffler versus Warnock race, Warnock runs away with it. This is not shocking. Kelly Loeffler is very unpopular and has low polling numbers and has multiple scandals under her belt. Remember that whole insider trading scandal? Yeah, that was her, as well as the other senator from North Carolina, but she got the brunt of it. Well, against Doug Collins, Raphael Warnock is not doing the best. However, you can see in the same poll, which shows him doing so well against Loeffler, and also showed Ossoff doing so well against Purdue, he is in the lead. Now, it is one poll, but also, and daily costs will slightly favor the Democrats from my experience, it does show that there is a case where the Democrats are making this race contentious, not necessarily in their favor, but contentious. So you have two Senate elections which are already looking like it could go either way. So what about the presidential election? Well, if this line doesn't say it could go either way, I don't know what does. Joe Biden and Donald Trump have been neck and neck with each other. And the three aggregate pollsters, which is 270 to win, Real Clear Politics, and 538, all show Biden with a slight lead. By slight, I genuinely mean under 1%, while Donald Trump basically has a perfect 46.6%, with 6% undecided. That's going to be interesting, because historically the state breaks red, and I'll show you that. However, if that undecided stays home, or just breaks evenly, Joe Biden most likely will win. Slightly, but he'll win. So, what does the average polling tell us? Well, it shows a steady decline for Donald Trump, though he does seem to have a floor of about 46-45%, while Joe Biden is actually in the same boat. He has a floor of about 45-46%. See, in all of these polls, neither of them are really dropping below the mid-40s, except for some small one-offs. But now, let's take a look at this. And we've got Quinnipiac, which had that pro-democratic poll, as did Daily Kos. But also, Renfield and Wilton Strategies, I believe, let's go back here, also had a pro-democratic poll. But but if we look at these numbers, they were, in many ways, not as favorable for the Senate as they are for Joe Biden, and except for Renfield. So we see a trend where Joe Biden is gaining, but they both have this floor of about 45%. And of course, when you throw the Libertarian candidate in there, it is going to skew the polls ever so slightly away. But it is very telling that Donald Trump only has really two polls which have shown him doing well: the YouGov CBS poll and the Monmouth poll. Granted, the Monmouth poll is good quality, but so is the Quinnipiac poll. So what this says is, when we combine the presidency with the two Senate elections, Democrats do seem to be gaining slightly in the state, while Republicans seem to be losing some steam overall. Now let's go back into the history, starting with the 2016 U.S. presidential election. The darker the blue, the more it went for the Democrats. The darker the red, the more it went for the Republicans. Now, what does this map tell us? Well, it says there are big red chunks in Georgia, and some very blue chunks. If you can't guess, this is essentially a population map. Very red areas are less populated or very suburban. Very blue areas are more city-like. In fact, you can match out basically the four or five biggest cities in Georgia: Atlanta, Augusta, Columbus, Macon, and Savannah. And there you have it. This is, so it's essentially the urban-rural divide map. And, of course, in this election, Donald Trump won. So, let's keep going backwards. Let's go to 2012, an election where the Democrat won, but not Georgia. And you see an interesting little trend. All of a sudden, you've got this strip down here where the suburbs go slightly more blue, except in Atlanta. In Atlanta, oh, these are much more red. But you get more of this sort of strip between Columbus, Macon, and Augusta, which is a more suburban area, but probably a little bit more, I'd say, liberal. Now we get to 2008, and as you can see, there's barely any change, except it got slightly darker in 2012, so little bit lighter. 2014, oh, now things are getting interesting, where we're losing all these suburban areas, but overall the state is getting more pale. And if you want to see the extreme example of it, 2000, where you get a bit of the suburban, but a lot of pale. And as far as I'm aware, the Republicans won every time in these elections. But as you can see, there's a massive pale setup that eventually consolidates down into this very red-blue dichotomy. Now, for the last one, let's use the most recent statewide election, which was Georgia's gubernatorial election, which was incredibly close, and many people believe it was stolen, but this is the winning strategy for Democrats in Georgia. Dark blue, light red across the state. What compared to Donald Trump, you essentially see a general bluing of the state, not the Democrats doing really well in one area, like between, let's say, 2014 and 2012, where the Democrats really gain a bunch of blue in the suburbs. Instead, here you've just got just a general light blue of the state. So let's look at the numbers, as I apparently go back to DuckDuckGo by accident. I don't know why it's glitching out. Give me a second. There we go. Okay, so the exact numbers. As you can see, Brian Kemp got almost 2 million votes, but so did Stacey Abrams. They were actually only 50,000 votes apart, not 500,000. Which is very close. Sorry, my nose is a tad clogged if you hear me making some weird breathy noises. Meanwhile, in 2016, that's actually not that far apart either. If you notice, 150 votes, 50,000 votes, or almost 200 actually, almost 200,000 votes. But the turnout is almost identical. What about 2012? Barack Obama was known to bring people out more. He didn't do as well as in 2018. That's strange. The midterm elections are supposed to have low turnout. What does this say? It says, watch Georgia. All the Democrats need is high turnout in Atlanta and sort of a moderating effect in these suburbs. Or not suburbs, in these rural areas. If they can just pale it a bit more and a bit more dark blue, Georgia flips. Like that. No problem. Ooh, voice crack. I'm very sorry, everyone. But yeah, that's essentially the state of Georgia. When we went over Iowa, we were talking about how, the Democrats really are just consolidating their support into the urban areas, and they just need a little bit more support in the rural ones. That it goes tenfold for Georgia. Whether they get this area to turn out a bit more, this sort of center urbanized strip, or they just manage to pad their numbers out a bit in the north and deep south of Georgia, they'll win. So with all that being said, if you liked the video, drop a like down below, and also a comment on your opinion on the matter. In this case, what do you think is going to happen in Georgia? I'm personally in the boat of, it's going to go red, but by the slightest margin, with a solid chance of one of those three races flipping. Especially if we end up with a 50-50 Senate and that Georgia special election decides whether it goes Democratic or Republican fully, or whether it remains tied or goes fully to the Democrats. In this case is what it would decide. Or maybe 51 Republican does this flip it to a 50-50 Senate in favor of the Democrats. So, what's your opinion on that? Now, if you want to see more from the channel, click the subscribe button and the notification bell to be alerted when new content comes out. And if you want to hear more from me outside of YouTube, I have a Twitter, @OneManThinkTan1, the Roman numeral, link down in the description below. And, most importantly, as always, have a wonderful day.